Death underground is always the same, whether in a modern megalopolis or in another world. The chief construction engineer of underground structures, Kong Min-ho, remembered how a multi-ton layer of raw soil had collapsed at a metro station under construction in Seoul. The steel supports snapped all at once. A tumbler screamed, and then darkness fell, smelling of concrete and crushed iron. Min-ho didn't have time to feel afraid. He was simply crushed to dust. But instead of eternal emptiness, his lungs suddenly convulsed outward, drawing in a gulp of icy, thin air that sent his chest into a fit of coughing. He lay face down on stone shards sharp as razors. All around him was a solid, deafening roar, the steady pounding of hundreds of heavy hammers against granite, shouts, the crack of breaking wood, and the whistle of leather whips. Kong Min-ho tried to get up, leaning on his hands, but his palms were seared with sharp pain. Bringing them up to his face, he froze. These are not his hands. The fingers were short, bruised, and bloody, with torn nails and gray granite dust ground into the skin. Heavy, rusted shackles connected by a short forged chain dangled from the wrists. The body belonged to a thin, wiry teenager of about 17, dressed in a sleeveless vest made of rough, untanned sheepskin. At that same instant, molten lead seemed to splash into the back of his skull. Someone else's memory, crude and short like the blow of a club, poured into his consciousness. Attention, soul fusion recorded. Consciousness synchronization. 100% welcome to the system of geoarchitecture and underground fortification your vessel. Kong Jin-woo, stonecutter slave of the Black Peak current status. Exhaustion endurance reduced by 40%. Stage 1 pulmonary silicosis, selected class. Mining engineer rank F, a transparent, neon blue interface flashed before Jin-woo's eyes. Exactly like the ones in those Korean web novels and manhwa he sometimes used to read on the subway after his shift. From the fragments of the former owner's memory, a grim picture took shape. This was a harsh Middle Ages. Black Peak was a cyclopean crag, rising alone amid endless rocky foothills. At the very summit of this crag, like a bird of prey, perched the castle of a mad Lord Pak, Chul-hyun. This feudal lord was obsessed. He believed that deep inside Black Peak ran a living vein, a mythical seam of purest mountain silver and mana-bearing ore. For the sake of this, hundreds of slaves day after day gnawed by hand into the solid granite, driving adits. The bodies of those who died of exhaustion or cave-ins were simply thrown into the deep ravine at the foot of the mountain. "Hey, Carrion, what are you lying there for?" A whistling sound rang out over Jin-woo's ear, and a heavy leather whip lined with lead weights lashed across his back. The pain was such that Jin-woo's vision went dark. It felt as though his back had been slashed with a red-hot knife. Standing over him was an overseer, a stocky, thick-set brute in a filthy leather gambeson, with a beastly mug and greasy hair. This was the warden Ma Song-tae. A whip twitched in his hand, and a heavy war pick swayed at his belt. "Get to the crowbar, rat spawn," roared Ma Song-tae, drawing back for a second blow. "If your card isn't full of or chips by sunset, I'll personally skin you and hang you on the gate." Without a word, Jin-woo rolled aside, avoiding the next blow, and rose sharply to his feet. His mind, trained over years of managing underground construction, instantly suppressed the panic and the pain. He looked at the overseer with an icy, calculating gaze. Jin-woo silently bent down, picked up the heavy, bent iron crowbar lying at his feet, and moved away to the granite wall of the face, where an oil lamp burned dimly. Ma Song-tae spat and walked on down the line of slaves, whistling his whip down onto the backs of those working too slowly. Jin-woo leaned his forehead against the cold, damp stone. He needed to assess the situation. So, depth of the working approximately 40 meters from the surface. No natural ventilation. Rock high-density gray granite. These savages are hitting it heat-in with direct blows without accounting for cracks or cleavage. They're wasting 10 times more effort than necessary. He raised the crowbar and touched its tip to the granite wall. Immediately, lines of system logs ran before his eyes, highlighting the gray stone with neon lines. Attention! Passive skill activated. Geoanalysis of structure rank F, object of study. Granite face. Sector 4 structural defects detected. A micro crack of stress found at a depth of 12 centimeters. Direction of rock cleavage. 45 degrees to the plane of impact, recommended point of force application, highlighted with a blue marker. Jin Woo looked closer. A little to the right of where the slaves usually struck, there was a barely noticeable dark vein in the stone. If struck there at the right angle, the granite would split on its own. He gripped the crowbar more firmly, swung it back over his shoulder, and, calculating the trajectory with pendulum precision, delivered a short, sharp blow exactly on the blue point. The sound was not dull, as usual, but ringing, singing. A thin web of cracks ran across the granite with a quiet crackle. Jin Woo drove the tip of the crowbar into the resulting crack and threw his full weight onto the lever. With a crash and a rustle, a colossal slab of rock weighing no less than half a ton broke away from the wall, crumbling into neat pieces convenient for loading. The neighboring slaves stared at the boy in shock. They had been picking away at this section for 3 days straight, breaking tools and wearing their hands to the bone, and this scrawny kid had brought down the wall in one blow. Attention! Engineering calculations successfully applied, or chips mined. 450 kilograms labor efficiency increased by 600%. You have received 50 units of system experience. Jin Woo wiped the sweat from his forehead with a bloodied sleeve. His cynical, calculating engineer's mind was already building a plan. To escape from Black Peak, a sheer cliff guarded by 100 heavily armed guards, he needed a hidden base. And that base would be here, underground, in the very heart of the mountain. By evening, Jin Woo's cart was overflowing with high-quality chips. The overseer Ma Song-tae, accepting the work, walked around the pile of stone for a long time, suspiciously examining the even breaks, but there was nothing to find fault with. He only grunted sullenly and tossed Jin Woo his daily ration, a piece of stale bread and a mug of foul water. At night, the slaves were driven into a giant natural cave in the middle tier of the crag, sealed off by massive iron bars. Guards were on duty only at the exits. Jin Woo sat down in the darkest corner of the cave, slowly chewing the tough bread. His body ached with exhaustion, but the system had already begun distributing the experience gained, launching a regeneration process. Attention! Your level has increased. Level 1, Level 2 Endurance Recovery accelerated by 15%. Engineering Blueprint unlocked. Improvised Wedge Jack active skill unlocked. Acoustic Sounding of Voids rank F. Hey kid! A tall, broad-shouldered man of about 35 approaches corner, his chains clinking quietly. His right ear was mangled, and a brand was visible on his chest. This was Choi Do-hyun, the unofficial leader of the Fourth Face's slaves, a former mercenary who had been captured by Lord Pak. I saw what you did to the face. You weren't just swinging a pick. You know stone. Jin Woo raised his eyes. The engineer's calm, appraising gaze made the former mercenary subconsciously tense up. I know how to make the mountain work for me, not against me, Jin Woo answered quietly. And I know that Pak Chul-hyun's castle at the summit stands on a rotten foundation. Choi Do-hyun narrowed his eyes and crouched down beside him. What do you mean? Speak plainly. If you have thoughts on how to make our lives easier, I'll listen. The men at the face are dead tired. 1 more week at this pace, and half of them will be carried out feet first. I won't make your lives easier, Jin Woo cut in cynically, but I can give you a chance to get out of here alive. Listen to me, Do-hyun. Lord Pak is searching for a silver vein, forcing us to dig deeper. But his foremen are idiots. They're driving the adit straight under the aquifer of the eastern slope. Another 10 or 15 meters forward, and they'll break into an underground pocket. The adit will flood in 3 minutes. Everyone there will drown like rats. Choi Do-hyun turned pale. He knew from experience what a water breach in a mine meant certain death for the entire tier. How do you know this? He whispered, grabbing Jin Woo by the shoulder. I hear the stone. Jin Woo gently but firmly removed the mercenary's hand. We need to change the direction of our strike. Not forward but sideways, toward the abandoned dry working of the third tier. There, behind a solid wall, is a natural karst cave. If we break through there, we'll have a hidden place where the guards won't find us. We can move tools there, stockpile supplies, and prepare weapons. Choi Do-hyun looked at Jin-woo for a long time, trying to detect signs of madness or lies in his face. But the 32-year-old engineer Kong Min-ho inside, the 17-year-old boy, was absolutely calm. "What's required of me and the men?" Choi Do-hyun asked hoarsely. "I need 5 of the most reliable and sturdy guys who know how to keep quiet." Jin-woo spoke clearly, as if giving an order on a construction site. "Tomorrow we'll start laying out a false face. We'll pretend to be digging on Ma Song-tae's orders, while actually starting to drive a hidden gallery at a 30-degree angle. I'll show you where to strike, so the stone comes away without noise. And also, I need iron. Any scraps of crowbars, rivets, old chains. We'll make tools that don't break." Choi Do-hyun stood up, his chains clinking briefly. "I'll find the men, Jin-woo, and I'll find the iron. But if they catch us driving the side passage, Ma Song-tae will bury us alive in this mountain." "I'm not wrong," Jin-woo replied, looking at the blue flicker of the interface. "The earth doesn't lie." The next morning, the fourth face greeted the slaves with the usual cold and the smell of sulfurous smoke from the torches. But for Jin-woo, this day already obeyed completely different laws. As soon as the overseer Ma Song-tae, yawning, moved off toward the exit of the gallery, Choi Do-hyun gave the boy a brief nod. 5 sturdy miners stood behind Jin-woo's sullen, silent man. Jin-woo went to the farthest, deadened wall of the face, hidden from the guard's view by an outcrop of rock. His left eye flashed neon blue for a second as the system projected a 3D grid directly onto the granite mass. "Attention! Engineering mode launched. Hidden excavation target. Karst void, sector B12 distance. 4.8 meters warning. A direct strike will cause the vault to collapse. Form a relieving arch, optimal points for rock removal highlighted. Listen to me," Jin-woo said quietly but firmly, pointing the crowbar at the granite. "We don't strike inward, but in a semicircle. First we cut the lower groove, then undercut the sides. The stone should come away in large blocks, not small chips, so we can immediately use them to seal the entrance when we leave. Do-hyun, your group covers us with carts of chips. Not a single living soul should see what's growing behind this pile of debris." "We'll do it," Choi Do-hyun grunted, gripping his pick. The work began in earnest. Thanks to the system, Jin-woo guided the excavation with jeweler's precision. He didn't waste the men's strength. Points highlighted with blue markers indicated places of natural stress in the stone. One precise blow of the wedge, and an even piece of granite would break away from the wall with a dull crack. The men could barely keep up putting out their hands, amazed at how easily the solid rock yielded to this strange boy. By noon, they had dug in almost 2 meters. The passage came out narrow, low, but perfectly reinforced thanks to the arched shape of the vault, which Jin-woo had calculated according to all the laws of structural mechanics. "Attention! Your understanding of geostructures has increased. Skill geoanalysis upgraded to rank F+ speed of hidden excavation, plus 10% received. 150 units of experience." Suddenly the system before Jin-woo's eyes flashed furiously with red warning symbols, and from the depths of the main shaft, where the rest of the slaves were working, came a strange, dull rumble like distant thunder. "Attention! Critical threat detected. In the main gallery of Sector 4, slaves have broken through into the aquifer. Volume of incoming water, 150 liters per second. Time to complete flooding of the lower tier. 12 minutes, Jin-woo." One of Choi Do-hyun's men leaped into the passage, breathing heavily. There's trouble. Black water is gushing from the far wall. Ma Song-tae and the guards are running to the lifts. They're going to lock the lower tier gates so the water doesn't go up. They're leaving us here to drown. Choi Do-hyun swore, his face twisted with fury. The men grabbed their crowbars. "Damn it, if they close the gate, we'll drown here in 10 minutes, the former mercenary shouted. "We need to break through to the lifts. By force. Stand still," Jin Woo's icy, thunderous voice froze everyone in place. The boy slowly crawled out of the narrow passage, holding a heavy piece of granite in his hands. There was no panic on his face. The blue interface before his eyes was already calculating hydrodynamic flows. It's 40 meters up the incline to the lifts. The guard will shoot you with crossbows through the bars before you get there. We don't need to run upward. Have you lost your mind? The water's coming this way, one of the miners shouted. Water obeys the laws of physics, not the orders of Lord Pak. Jin Woo turned sharply to Choi Do-hyun. Do-hyun, take all the men. Bring all the wooden supports, shields, and empty carts here to our hidden passage. We're not going to run from the water. We're going to redirect its flow. Attention! Emergency system quest received. Hydraulic trap. Objective: block the water's advance into the hidden bay sector and use the flooding to neutralize the Sector 4 guard force reward. Unlocking of Dungeon Architect class, 1000 experience. Hydraulic sluice gate, blueprint penalty for failure. Death by drowning, do as I said. Jin Woo barked, and the blue countdown timer before his eyes began rapidly ticking down. 11:59. 11:58. If you want to live, follow me. The system's timer mercilessly counted down the seconds. 10:42. 10:41. From the depths of the main adit came the distinct, blood-chilling roar of the invading torrent. Water, mixed with granite grit and mud, was rapidly filling the drainage ditches and rising to ankle height. From the far end of the tunnel came the panicked screams of the overseers and the clang of a heavy iron gate slamming shut Ma Song Tae and his guards. Just as Jin Woo had predicted, we're sealing off the tier, condemning the slaves to death. Jin Woo, we're dragging everything we found. Choi Do-hyun hosped. Together with the men, he hauled out of the darkness massive oak beams that had been used to prop up the vaults and several thick wooden shields from old carts. Here, quickly! Jin Woo pointed to the narrow neck of the fork leading to their hidden passage. We need to build an improvised sluice gate. Drive the beams in vertically between the floor and ceiling. Move! His left eye flickered continuously with blue, projecting lines of ideal hydraulic pressure distribution. On Earth, Manhwa had built tunnels capable of withstanding groundwater pressure at depths of hundreds of meters. A flow from a single breached pocket was, for him, a complex but entirely solvable engineering problem. Attention! Skill activated. Rapid fortification design, creating object, temporary water retaining dam, rank, E recommended shield tilt angle. 45 degrees to the water flow. To reduce frontal resistance, the men worked at the limit of human endurance. Fear of drowning in the dark stone gut gave them strength. Choi Do-hyun, with his enormous hands, drove oak wedges under the braces, fixing the wooden shields at the angle Jin Woo indicated. The joints and gaps between the boards were furiously stuffed by the slaves with rags, bundles of straw from their bedding, and greasy clay dug up right from under their feet. The water arrived when a little more than 4 minutes remained on the timer. At first, it was a turbid, seething stream up to the knees, but within 30 seconds, a heavy wave struck them in the chest. The water was rising at a terrifying speed. It slammed with a crash into the barrier erected by the slaves. The wood creaked ominously, clay began washing out of the joints, and the beams bowed under the colossal pressure. It's holding. The flow's easing off, one of the miners shouted, trying to hold the shield with his shoulder. Back! Everyone get behind the relief line. Jin Woo commanded, grabbing the man by the collar and hurling him into their narrow hidden passage. The dam will hold. I built in a threefold safety margin for bending. The water needs to go somewhere, and it'll take the path of least resistance. He was right. According to Jin Woo's calculations, the water blocked by the dam, unable to break through into their shelter, rushed back along the main corridor straight toward the lift platform and the spiral staircase, where the guard post was located. Through the bars of the dam, the slaves could hear the furious torrent fill the low ground by the lift within seconds. There, trapped between the locked gates of the upper tier and the rising water, were the overseer Ma Song Tae himself and 3 of his henchmen. Open up, you bastards! came Ma Song Tae's insanely terrified scream from somewhere in the distance. The water, it's rising. From above, opened a gurgle. The sound choked off. The hydraulic pressure filled the air pocket by the lift right up to the ceiling. The overseer's fight for survival was over in a couple of minutes. At that same instant, a cascade of bright blue system windows flashed before Jin Woo's eyes, lighting up the darkness of the passage. Emergency quest, hydraulic trap, successfully completed. You have eliminated the threat of flooding to the hidden zone and destroyed the sector. 4 supervisory, squad 4/4 received. 1,000 units of system experience. Your level has increased. Level 2, Level 5. Your class has evolved. Mining Engineer, Dungeon Architect rank E. New crafting branches unlocked. Mechanical pressure traps, small cycle or metallurgy blueprint received. Hydraulic sluice gate with counterweight. The system's data poured into Minho's brain, expanding his capabilities. Now, he didn't just see the cracks in the stone, he felt the entire architecture of Black Peak, as if the mountain were a living organism and he its surgeon. His endurance and strength were instantly restored, and his breathing cleared of granite dust. A dead silence hung inside the passage. The water beyond the dam had calmed, turning into an underground lake that cut off the 4th face from the rest of the castle. Choi Do-hyun slowly turned to Jinwoo. In the semi-darkness, barely pushed back by a dying torch, the 17-year-old boy's eyes glowed with a steady, otherworldly blue light. The former mercenary, who had seen no small number of mages and high-ranking warriors in his time, sank to one knee without another word, bowing his head. Behind him, breathing heavily, the other miners also dropped to their knees. "You're no slave, boy," Do-hyun said hoarsely. "And you never were. You are the master of this mountain. Let us. What do we do next?" Jinwoo walked up to the dam, touched the wet oak beam with his palm, and looked into the depths of their hidden passage, which led straight into the unexplored karst voids of Black Peak. Next, Jinwoo smirked cynically, and the system interface displayed a map of the entire mountain, including Lord Pak Chul-hyun's chambers at the very summit. Next, we go deeper into the karst caves. Lord Pak thinks he's locked us in here to die. He doesn't know that he's locked himself in a stone box, the keys to which are now mine. We'll build a forge here. We'll smelt steel this world has never seen. And when we come to the surface, Black Peak will have a new owner. Attention, you have entered an unexplored zone. The great karst voids of Black Peak territory status. No man's land/hidden zone, natural mana background. Elevated 12% breaking through the last 30 centimeters of the granite bulkhead. Jinwoo's group literally tumbled out into a colossal underground cavity. There was no suffocating fume of the galleries here. On the contrary, the air felt cool, clean, and remarkably fresh, with a faint hint of ozone. The blue glow of Jinwoo's interface pulled cyclopean vaults out of the darkness. From a ceiling lost somewhere 30 meters up hung gigantic limestone stalactites, glimmering with flecks of some translucent luminescent mineral. At the bottom of the cave, an underground stream rumbled dully, a crystal-clear river gushing from a fissure and running off somewhere into the depths of the rock. "Gods," Choi Do-hyun whispered, looking back at the narrow passage they had just sealed with stones. "You could hide an entire city in here, and the castle guards don't even suspect there's such an abyss beneath their feet." "Not just a city, Do-hyun." Jinwoo stepped forward, his left eye feverishly scanning the cave walls, producing cascades of system logs. "This is our production plant. Natural resource detected. Bog iron siderite in streambed deposits. Natural resource detected. Seam of black shale, high-calorie coal, raw material quality. High. Suitable for coking Kong Min Ho." Inside, Jinwoo's body nearly laughed at the stroke of luck. On Earth, metallurgical plants were built where 3 factors converged: ore, coal, and water for cooling. Here, in this isolated cave, nature had ideally brought it all together. Lord Pak Chul-hyun had been driving people to their deaths on the upper tiers for scraps of silver, not noticing that the true wealth of Black Peak quality anthracite and iron lay right beneath his castle. "All right, men, Enough amazement. Jin Woo turned to the survivors. We don't have much time. The guards up top will soon realize the fourth face is completely flooded and will try to open the sluices or wait for the water to recede. We have at most 3 days before they begin large-scale work. He opened the system menu and selected this small cycle or metallurgy option. Project available: improvised bottom blast furnace, materials for crafting, granite blocks 20 PCS, clay 100 kilograms, wood / coal 50 kilograms, Do Hyun, take 3 men. Gather the black, oily stone by the riverbank, that's coal. Crush it into crumbs. The rest carry the even granite fragments from the passage and dig clay by the waterfall. We're going to build a furnace. A furnace? Underground, one of the miners doubted. We'll suffocate from the smoke, boy. Jin Woo looked at him the way one looks at a first-year student who failed his aerodynamics exam. Look at the ceiling. Jin Woo pointed the crowbar upward, where the luminescent crystals gently pulsed. The stalactites leaned toward the eastern wall. There's a tectonic fissure there that opens onto the sheer cliff outside the mountain. The natural draft here is stronger than in the chimney of a good tavern. All the smoke will vent outside through the micropores, and the Baron up top will think it's just marsh fog at the foot of the mountain. We build. After 14 hours of continuous work, a squat structure, narrowing toward the top, rose in the middle of the cave made of granite slabs, thickly coated with gray karst clay. Jin Woo personally oversaw the internal profile of the furnace, shaping the correct hearth form for iron reduction. From hollow stalks of cave reed and the leather aprons of the dead overseers, the men, under Do Hyun's direction, built crude but airtight bellows. Object design complete. Production unit created. Architect small blast furnace, rank E metal recovery efficiency, plus 25% due to system temperature stabilization. Light it, Jin Woo commanded. Pieces of anthracite mixed with heavy, rusty bog or flue into the furnace. Soon, a steady, roaring violet-blue flame burst from the charging hole. Air forced in by the bellows raised the temperature inside the hearth to a record 1,300 degrees for this world. The men watched this technological wonder, spellbound. In medieval bloomery hearths, iron came out as a bloom porous, full of slag, which had to be hammered out for hours. But Jin Woo was using the principles of the coke process. 3 hours later, he knocked out the lower clay plug with the crowbar. From the furnace's tap hole, with a hiss and a shower of sparks, a blindingly white, liquid stream of molten pig iron poured into a pre-dug sand mold. Attention! First smelting cycle successfully completed. Material obtained. High-carbon weapon-grade steel, rank E+ quantity. 40 kilograms. You have received 300 units of experience. This isn't bloomery iron. Choi Do Hyun, once the metal had cooled and darkened a little, carefully touched it with the tip of his old, cracked sword. The metal rang clear, deep, without a dull, crumbling sound. Jin Woo, this is top-grade steel. The Kingsguard's forge blades from steel like this. From these ingots you could make. We're not going to make blades. Jin Woo cut him off, wiping his soot-covered face. A blade requires long forging and swordsmanship mastery. And among our fighters, there's only you. The rest are exhausted peasants. We need a weapon that will equalize the chances between a starving slave and a heavily armored knight in chainmail. A weapon of positional warfare. He opened the system's updated blueprint sheet, which had become available after reaching level 5. Select a blueprint for mass production. Heavy siege crossbow with a winch mechanism, rank E, pierces knightly armor from 80 paces. Pressure-triggered trap mine, rank E, uses the kinetic energy of a mountain spring. Do Hyun, can you forge? Jin Woo asked, pointing to the red-hot steel strip. Got my hand in during my mercenary days, the giant grinned. Excellent. We'll forge trigger mechanisms and bows for heavy crossbows. And from the remaining granite and coal, I'll build something that will make Pak Chul Hyun regret ever building his castle on this mountain. We're laying out a defensive perimeter. Production started according to blueprint. Heavy siege crossbow with winch mechanism. Rank E, parts forging progress. 40% resources available for defensive structures. steel strips 25 kilograms, cave reed timber 150 kilograms, while Choi Do-hyun, grunting heavily, brought the sledgehammer down on the red-hot steel blanks, forging massive bows for the future crossbows. Kang Jin-woo did not waste time. His left eye, flickering blue, studied the narrow passage connecting their new base to the flooded fourth face. "Men, follow me," Jin-woo commanded, nodding to two miners. "We're going to install the first line of defense." The water on the far side of the sluice dam had settled somewhat, but it still stood like a flat, ominous mirror. Jin-woo activated the system to check the state of the structures. Object: temporary water-retaining dam rank, E structural integrity. 72% warning. Acoustic activity detected on the opposite side. Distance 45 meters. Manhwa narrowed his eyes. The system's interface clearly picked up vibrations traveling through the stone vault from the upper tiers. Lord Pak, Chul Hyun's men had come to their senses. They realized they'd lost control of the lower gallery, and were now trying to break through the debris and water to assess the scale of the disaster and retrieve the overseer bodies. "They've started digging a bypass channel from above," Jin-woo said quietly, analyzing the incoming data. "They think they can drain the water and reach us." "Duyung, how many bows are ready?" "3, Commander," the mercenary shouted from the depths of the cave, wiping sweat from his brow. "Fitted the trigger locks tight, just like in your blue drawings. The springs came out fierce. Can't cock them by hand, only with the winch. Bring one over here. We're setting up the hydraulic sluice." Using the new capabilities of his dungeon architect class, Jin-woo designed a trap right at the entrance to their karst cave. They modified the dam, cutting a sturdy steel sluice gate with an improvised counterweight into its lower section. Jin-woo's plan was cynical and precise. When Lord Pak's punitive detachment descended into the drain gallery, Jin-woo would open the sluice with a single pull of a lever, not to let water into their own space, but to release the accumulated hydraulic pressure of the karst spring straight into the faces of the advancing enemy. And to make sure no one survived the initial blow of the elements, a heavy siege crossbow was mounted directly above the sluice. Attention! First defensive node created. Sluice firing point number 1, crossbow damage. 180 units guaranteed armor penetration effect against rank F armor additional effect. Hydraulic ram knockdown. Stun you have received. 500 units of experience for creating a complex trap. Jin-woo. They've broken through the upper bulkhead. Water from the main gallery is draining away. One of the sentry miners called out, keeping watch at the dam's viewing slit. Through the narrow gap in the oak beams, Jin-woo saw the level of the muddy water on the other side begin to drop rapidly. The first torches appeared in the tunnel. A dull echo carried the tramp of forged boots on wet stone and rough voices. These are not simple overseers with whips. Lord Pak had sent professional soldiers. They wore heavy leather jackets, studded with iron plates, carrying buckler shields and short assault swords perfectly suited for fighting in cramped underground corridors. Leading the detachment was a tall, one-eyed weapons master Captain Kim, the right hand of the castle's guard commander. "Find the bodies of Ma Song, Tae, and these rats," Captain Kim commanded thunderously, kicking a piece of a floating cart out of the mud. "Lord Pak is displeased. If the mine flooded because of a rebellion, we'll hang every 10th man on the castle walls." The soldiers advanced cautiously, knee-deep in liquid mud, shields at the ready. They came right up to the dam built by the slaves. "Captain, look!" One of the guards pointed at the neat oak wall blocking the gallery. "This isn't a cavern. This is a barricade. Look how the logs are fitted. Someone's here." Captain Kim narrowed his eyes, moving closer. His assault sword clanged against the wood. "Hey, swamp scum, I know you're hiding in there," he shouted into the darkness beyond the dam. "Come out one by one on your knees, and Lord Pak might just cut off your hands instead of feeding you to the dogs. You have 3 seconds." Absolute silence reigned behind the dam. Only barely visible, in the deepest darkness, Kang Jin-woo's left eye glowed blue as he sat at the lever of the heavy crossbow. Beside him, Choi Do-hyun kept his hand on the hydraulic counterweight's catch. "Time's up," Jin-woo whispered quietly. "Shift's over." Trap trigger activated. Hydraulic trap phase 2. Jin Woo sharply pulled the sluice lever, and Du Hyun knocked out the crossbow spring's catch. The massive steel sluice plate flew upward instantly under the force of the counterweight. The colossal volume of water accumulated in the car's pocket under enormous pressure struck the narrow gallery like a shell fired from a cannon. The powerful hydraulic ram knocked the first 3 soldiers off their feet, crushing their shields and hurling their bodies onto the sharp stones of the face. At the same instant, the heavy crossbow fired. A thick steel bolt the length of an arm, fitted with a faceted point, pierced the oak gap of the dam with a terrifying whistle. Captain Kim didn't even have time to raise his sword. The bolt struck him exactly in the center of his chest, easily punching through the iron plates of his armor, tearing through the chainmail, and pinning the officer's body to the granite wall of the gallery 10 meters behind him. His eyes glazed over instantly. "Captain!" The surviving guard screamed in horror, swept away by the seething torrent of water. The water, filling the tunnel, wouldn't let them stand, and the narrow space of the gallery turned their retreat into chaos. Soldiers were smashed against outcrops of rock, drowning in dark foam, losing their weapons. Attention! Black Peak Castle's punitive detachment eliminated August 8th. You have received 1,800 units of system experience. Your level has increased. Level 5, Level 7 Endurance plus 3, Engineering Vision plus 2, new blueprint unlocked. Chain-driven lift winch. When the flow of water subsided, silence once again settled over the gallery, broken only by the occasional squelch of mud. Of the 8 elite guardsmen of Lord Pak, not one survived. Jin Woo slowly stepped over the remains of the dam and approached Captain Kim's body, firmly nailed to the rock. The boy coldly pulled a bundle of heavy iron keys to the castle's upper tiers from the dead man's belt and slipped a ring bearing the seal of House Pak off his finger. Choi Do-hyun and the other miners came out behind him. They looked at the soldiers' corpses with wild, fierce pride. Fear of the masters of Black Peak had vanished forever. Jin Woo's system had proven that their invincible guards died just as easily as ordinary workers. Jin Woo. Do-hyun picked up a crossbow someone had dropped. Now they know this wasn't just an accident. Soon Lord Pak will mobilize the entire garrison. They'll bury this gallery under rocks from above and wall us in alive. Let them try. Jin Woo smiled cynically, tossing the bundle of keys in his palm. They think they'll wall us in from outside. But with the system and these keys, we get to choose which of their bedrooms we knock on from below. Back to the cave. We need to start a second smelt. It's time to forge real weapons for storming the upper floors. Attention! Your level has increased. Level 7, Level 8 skill unlocked. Ventilation mapping rank D, passive ability received. Minor silence. Your footsteps and actions underground produce 30% less noise. The disappearance of Captain Kim and his elite detachment caused real panic in Black Peak Castle. Through the ventilation shafts and tectonic fissures, which Jin Woo could now see as clearly as the palm of his hand thanks to his new skill, came the distant sound of alarm bells. Lord Pak Chul-hyun ordered the massive oak gates leading to the lower tiers sealed and posted a triple guard there. Storming through Heat-In would have been madness. But Kong Jin Woo had no intention of playing by anyone else's rules. Deep within the karst cave that had become their citadel, the upgraded smelting works roared away. Choi Do-hyun and his men, emboldened by their easy victory over the guards, worked tirelessly. Now they weren't forging bulky crossbows, but compact, concealable instruments of war. A full-size crossbow is useless in a narrow ventilation shaft, Jin Woo explained, sketching a diagram with a piece of charcoal right on a smooth granite block. The men crowded around him, catching every word. We need weapons for close tactical combat. Winch-cocked hand crossbows. A short faceted bolt made of our steel pierces chainmail at point-blank range. Do-hyun, how many blanks have you got? 12, Commander. The former mercenary proudly pointed to a neat row of heavy steel bows and cunning trigger locks. The men learned to temper the metal in an oil emulsion, just like you said. The springs come out solid granite, can't bend them without a lever. Attention! Serial weapons successfully created. Black Peak Tactical Assault Crossbow, rank E+, 12 PCS effect. Concealable carry, guaranteed penetration of light and medium armor at ranges up to 15 meters while the weapon's assembly was underway. Jin Woo activated ventilation mapping. His left eye pulsed with bright blue light. The real world faded, giving way to a three-dimensional neon schematic. The closed gates, the stone walls, the guard posts, all of it turned into transparent layers. The system charted routes through abandoned air ducts that had circulated air to heat the castle's kitchens and chambers for centuries. One such route led straight beneath the floor of the armory hall on the middle tier, bypassing all guard posts. Du Hyun, take the men. I'm appointing you commander of the assault group, Jin Woo said, rising and hanging the heavy bundle of keys taken from Captain Kim on his belt. We're not going to wait for them to wall us in. We'll strike from inside their own fortress. Take the assault crossbows and 1 crowbar each. Our target is the supply depot. A squad of 6 men moved deeper into the narrow vertical shaft. Thanks to the miner's silent skill, the men moved almost soundlessly despite their heavy tread and steel shackles, which Jin Woo had thoughtfully reforged into convenient combat vambraces. After 40 minutes of climbing up sheer stone ledges, Jin Woo raised his hand, calling the group to silence. Directly above their heads, dim torchlight filtered through a heavy iron grate, along with the smell of roasted meat. They were in a technical compartment right beneath the floor of the inner guard's barracks. Through the gaps, Jin Woo saw 2 soldiers. They were lazily throwing dice, discussing rumors about the curse of the lower tier and Captain Kim's death. They say it's not just water, one whispered, glancing around fearfully. They say the slaves summoned a mountain spirit. They found the captain nailed to the rock with a steel spear that 3 men couldn't lift. Talk less, the second one snapped. Lord Pak promised to send mercenary mages from the capital tomorrow. They'll burn these burrows to the ground. Jin Woo turned to Choi Do-hyun and silently raised his tactical crossbow, aiming through the grate. The mercenary grinned knowingly, cocking his own weapon with the belt hook. Sending mages, are they? Jin Woo whispered quietly, the blue targeting line locking onto the throat of the standing guard. They won't have time. Too short, muffled twangs of the bowstrings merged into a single sound. Steel bolts, fired from a distance of 5 paces, pierced the iron floor grate without the slightest ricochet. Short faceted tips entered exactly beneath the guard's shins with a wet crunch. Both soldiers collapsed onto the stone flags without even a cry. The dice fell from their hands, rattling quietly across the floor. Attention! Barracks sentries silently eliminated 2 halves received. 400 units of experience. Jin Woo put his shoulder against the massive grate. His left eye flashed blue, analyzing the mounting points. Do-hyun undercut the left pin. Men, crowbars on the lever, he commanded, mouthing the words silently. A second of coordinated effort, and the ancient grate gave way with a quiet screech, opening a passage upward. Jin Woo was the first to slip silently into the room, immediately rolling behind barrels of ale. Behind him appeared the grim faces of the miners. The shackles on their arms, reforged into spiked combat bracelets, gleamed dully in the torchlight. This was a rear annex to the armory hall. Behind a heavy oak door came the muffled hum of voices. In the main hall, the rest of the garrison's shift was on duty. Jin Woo instantly activated the system. Attention! Tactical scan of object launched. Armory hall, middle tier, number of enemies in adjacent room. 14 threat level. Low soldiers not combat ready. Armor removed structural vulnerability available. Ceiling support beam has critical where 65%. Collapse point highlighted. Manhwa inside. Jin Woo's body smirked cynically. These medieval builders had no idea what material fatigue and weight distribution were. Black Peak Castle was over 200 years old, and its wooden floors were held up mostly by good faith and thick layers of tar. Do-hyun, take 3 men. Wedge the main door leading to the castle corridor so reinforcements can't reach them. Jin Woo ordered in a whisper, pointing at the massive bolts. The rest with me. We're not going to storm them, Hedon. He approached a heavy support pillar of oak, blackened with age, which held up a massive mezzanine loaded with heavy crates full of spare chainmail and shields. Tons of dead iron hung directly above the heads of the resting guards. The system displayed a neon point before Jin Woo's eyes, the perfect place to strike, where the stress vectors converged. Here, Jin Woo placed the crowbar in the hands of the sturdiest miner. Hit this joint with everything you've got the moment I give the signal. Jin Woo himself took up position by the slightly open door to the main hall, raising his assault crossbow. Attention! Go, he breathed out. The heavy iron crowbar struck the rotting support with a dull thud. A terrible, dry crack of tearing wood fibers rang out. The support pillar tilted to the side. The wells of system logs before Jin Woo's eyes flashed furiously blue. Skill activated. Control collapse rank redistributing mass. Success. With a deafening crash, the entire left mezzanine, along with tons of scrap iron, chests, and stone blocks, came crashing down right onto the tables where Lord Pack's guardsmen sat. A cloud of ancient dust and splinters rose up. Wild screams rang out, the crunch of breaking bones, the clatter of scattered weapons. More than half the garrison detachment was buried under the debris in the very first second. To arms. Rebellion. A surviving squad leader rasped from beneath the wreckage of a table, trying to yank his stuck sword free. But the moment he raised his head, Jin Woo stepped toward him through the gray dust. The boy's left blue eye burned with a steady, merciless light. A steel bolt punched clean through the squad leader's helmet. The remaining guards, still on their feet, stunned and disoriented, didn't even manage to raise their shields. Choi Do-hyun's miners burst into the hall, wielding heavy crowbars and short crossbows with the efficiency of butchers. 2 minutes later, it was all over. The entire middle-tier armory hall had passed under the control of the rebels. Attention! Strategic node captured. Black Peak Armory Hall. You have destroyed the middle-tier garrison 14/14 loot access. 20 quality swords received. 15 crossbows. 8 sets of steel armor received. 3,500 units of system experience. Your level has increased. Level 8, Level 11. New mechanics class unlocked. Siege crafting of rune traps. The men rushed to the weapon racks, tears in their eyes, tearing off the remnants of their slave rags and pulling on solid guardsman armor. These were no longer exhausted convicts before Jin Woo now stood the backbone of his future underground army. Choi Do-hyun approached Jin Woo, fastening a heavy cuirass taken from squad leader across his chest. His face was spattered with blood, but his eyes burned with fierce triumph. Commander, the middle tier is ours. We could lock ourselves in here and hold the armory for months. There's plenty of food and arrows here. Lock ourselves in? Jin Woo swept his gaze over the wrecked hall and smiled cynically, looking at the system's blue map, where on the very top floor, in his luxurious chambers, an unsuspecting Lord Pack, Chul-hyun, was drinking wine. No, do you? Locking yourself in is for the weak. We just gained access to the main ventilation hub that leads straight into the upper castle's fireplaces. Get the armory forge furnaces going. We'll need a lot of sulfur and charcoal. We're going to give Lord Pack an unforgettable night. Attention, your level has increased. Level 11, Level 12 engineering recipe unlocked. Improvised thermal smoke compound range of ventilation mapping skill increased to 150 meters. The middle-tier armory forge now worked for its new masters. The miners, dressed in trophy guardsman armor, feverishly hauled sacks of yellow native sulfur and charcoal that had been stored in the castle's warehouses for the needs of Lord Pack's alchemists. While Choi Do-hyun distributed trophy swords and shields among the men, Kang Jin-woo stood at a massive branching point of the ventilation shafts. The system's blue interface overlaid an intricate schematic of the fortress's air currents onto the stone walls. All the thermal circuits running from the kitchens and lower furnaces converged here, before rising up into Lord Pack Chul-hyun's luxurious chambers and the halls of the senior officers. Commander, everything's ready. Do-hyun approached Jin Woo, holding a heavy forged ladle full of smoking sulfur coal mixture. If we light this here, will the smoke go up? Not just go up, Do Hyun. Jin Woo smiled cynically, touching the damper control lever. The laws of thermodynamics never fail. It's night up there now. The windows in the Lord's chambers are shut for warmth. Thanks to the pressure differential and the artificial draft I've created, this whole suffocating concentrate will fill the upper castle within 15 minutes. They won't even understand where death came from. Skill activated. Structural microclimate control rank E target. Upper residential sector of Black Peak Castle effectiveness forecast. Stunning and disorientation of 85% of enemy personnel. Light it, Jin Woo commanded curtly. Sacks of sulfur and coal flew into the ventilation hub's furnace. Jin Woo sharply turned the lever, sealing off the exits to the middle tier and directing the thick, acrid yellowish smoke straight upward through the stone shafts. Bellows driven by trophy chain winches, rumbling dully, forced the poisonous haze deep into the citadel. 10 minutes later, hell broke loose on the upper floors of the castle. Lord Pak Chul Hyun woke up from unbearable coughing and a burning sensation in his throat. His luxurious bedchamber was completely shrouded in thick, foul-smelling fog, through which the torches on the walls barely glowed with a dim crimson light. Guards! Guards to me! Lord Pak wheezed, sliding off his silk bed and trying to feel around on the nightstand for his richly decorated rune sword. But beyond the door of his chambers, panic screams, the pounding of feet, and the clatter of falling weapons could already be heard. The soldiers of the personal guard, choking on the sulphurous fumes, blindly stumbled through the corridors, losing consciousness right on the stone floor. The natural ventilation system, once the pride of Black Peak's builders, had become the perfect delivery system for poison. Lord Pak, the chief of the inner guard, burst into the bedchamber, kicking the door in, his face wrapped in a wet cloth. The lower gates, they're blocked from inside. Someone has sealed off all the exits and is poisoning us like rats through the chimneys. We need to break through to the wall, to fresh air. Who dare? Pak Chul Hyun's face twisted with fury and fear. He didn't have to wait long for an answer. A colossal, deafening blow rang out directly beneath their feet. This was Jin Woo, using an improvised pressure wedge jack and the system, bringing down the central lift shaft of the middle tier. The massive lifting platform, along with tons of stones, punched through the floor of the upper castle's main hall. Through the breach, raising clouds of limestone dust and ash, the former slaves of Black Peak began climbing up one after another. But now these were unified warriors, clad in heavy steel. Leading them was Kong Jin Woo. Around his left eye, neon blue rings of the system's interface spun furiously, and a cocked tactical crossbow was gripped in his hand. Attention! You have entered the control sector. Chambers of the Lord of Black Peak, current target. Pak Chul Hyun level 15, class. Iron Blood Swordsman warning. Enemy disoriented by toxic smoke effect. His agility reduced by 50%, Lord Pak. Jin Woo's icy voice echoed through the smoke-filled hall. The boy stopped 10 paces from the coughing feudal lord. Your shift is over. Hand over the keys to the fortress. Lord Pak, breathing heavily, raised his rune sword. The blade of the weapon flared with pale red flame. He was still a dangerous, high-ranking fighter. Wretched worm. Slay blood, Lord Pak snarled, stepping forward and drawing back for a crushing blow. I'll skin you myself. But Kong Min Ho inside Jin Woo's body merely narrowed his eyes cynically. To a construction engineer, any opponent's combat style was just a set of vectors and trajectories. Too slow, Jin Woo said quietly. A steel bolt from Jin Woo's assault crossbow tore through the smoke with a shriek and struck Lord Pak exactly in the right knee, shattering the kneecap. The violet flame on the Lord's sword instantly went out, and with a wild scream, he collapsed onto his left knee, dropping his weapon. Choi Do-hyun was instantly at his side, pressing the heavy point of his sword to the throat of the fallen master of Black Peak. The castle guards who remained alive, seeing their lord on his knees, dropped their weapons one by one into the filthy foam on the floor. A grand cascade of system windows flashed before Jin Woo's eyes, lighting up the entire hall with a triumphant blue glow. Attention! Main regional quest successfully completed. You have captured the citadel of Black Peak and overthrown Lord Pak Chul-hyun. Received 15,000 units of system experience. Your level has increased. Level 12, level 20. Maximum level for rank E. Your class has evolved. Dungeon Architect, Lord of the Mountain Citadel, rank D. Attention. Territory Black Peak, officially secured for your faction. Global construction and recruitment mechanics unlock. Jin Woo slowly walked to the castle window, overlooking the endless rocky foothills. The smoke was gradually clearing, giving way to the first ray of morning sun. The boy placed his hand on the stone windowsill. The mountain beneath his feet no longer felt foreign. It belonged to him completely. Commander, Du Hyun approached from behind, holding Lord Pak's heavy crown in his hands. What are your orders now? The mercenaries and mages from the capital might still come once they learn of the rebellion. Kong Jin Woo turned around. His left eye shone with the steady, unyielding light of the system, and a confident smile played on the face of an engineer who had finally gotten the perfect site for the greatest project of his life. Let them come, replied the Lord of the Mountain Citadel, looking at the newly unlocked system blueprint schematics for gigantic fortress artillery, underground passages, and rune traps. We're going to rebuild this mountain from top to bottom. Black Peak is no longer a prison for slaves. It's an impregnable bastion that will break the teeth of any army in this world. Let's begin the global reconstruction. Attention! Territory Black Peak status change to Reconstruction. Faction resources available. Weapon-grade steel 420 kilograms. Anthracite 12 tons. Trophy gold 2,400 NARS. Passive mana influx from the mountain's core. 45 units /hour 3 days after the fall of Lord Pak Chul-hyun. The castle atop the crag was unrecognizable. The fear and doom that had hung over Black Peak for centuries had given way to a feverish but perfectly structured hum of labor. The former slaves no longer coughed from granite dust in dark faces. Kong Jin Woo had completely reorganized the fortress's logistics and ventilation. The former Seoul Metro engineer had introduced things this Middle Ages had never seen. A clear division of shifts, mandatory 8th-hour sleep for the workers, and 3 hot meals a day from the deposed feudal lord's personal storerooms. Lord Pak, shackled in the very same chains he once used to rot people away in, now personally turned the crank of the water-pumping pump on the lower tier under the watchful eye of a grim miner. Jin Woo stood on the observation platform of the main tower. A strong mountain wind whipped at the hem of his new leather cloak, reinforced with steel plates from their forge. Before his left eye, the concentric rings of the system interface of the Lord of the Mountain Citadel spun furiously. Attention! System warning received faction reconnaissance reports. A crown punitive detachment has set out from the border fort Iron Gate. Enemy force composition: 150 heavy cavalry, 300 foot spearmen, 3 earth combat mages rank D time until arrival at the foot of Black Peak. 48 hours, 300 infantry and mages, Jin Woo narrowed his eyes cynically. They've decided to take back their silver trough. Commander, Choi Du-hyun ran heavily up onto the platform. A massive crowbar, reforged into a 2-handed war hammer, rested on his shoulder. The sentries on the southern slope confirm. Dust on the horizon. They're moving fast. The men are worried. We've only got 80 men able to hold a weapon. Against a regular army on open walls, we won't hold, even in trophy armor. And who said we'd be fighting on the walls, Du-hyun? Jin Woo turned to him, the blue glow of his eye reflecting off the metal of the mercenaries' pauldrons. Let them try to break the gates of the upper castle, if they can. Our defense will begin where they don't expect it. We're going to turn the entire climb up to Black Peak into one continuous engineering calculation. He unrolled a huge sheet of parchment before Du-hyun, on which the system's neon lines marked new defensive nodes of the crag. After reaching level 20, Jin Woo had unlocked access to siege crafting of rune traps. Listen to the plan. They'll drive all their infantry and cavalry up the single switchback road cut into the rock. Bring all our stores of high-carbon steel and karst clay up to the middle tier. We're going to activate the rune pressure circuit. For the next 2 days, Black Peak resembled a disturbed anthill. Under Jin Woo's direction, the workers installed concealed mechanisms at the sharp turns of the Seoul Mountain Road. Using the system's blueprints, Manhwa designed a cascade of traps operating on the laws of gravity and the mountain core's accumulated mana. The rock cavities adjacent to the road were secretly opened up. There, miners installed enormous steel plates on cocking mechanisms, gravity eccentrics. Defensive engineering object. Switchback rune trap cascade successfully installed mana cost to activate the circuit. 200 units charge full effect. Directed tectonic shift. Collapse of the outer edge of the roadbed by the end of the second day, when the foot of Black Peak filled with the steel gleam of the Royal Punitive Detachment. Jin Woo met them sitting on a rocky outcrop directly above the first gate of the Switchback Road. He wore no helmet, only the blue glow of the interface pulsed lazily in the twilight. The commander of the punitive force, Baron von Stock, in gleaming ornate armor, rode forward on a black horse. Looking up at the lone figure of the boy, he laughed contemptuously. "Hey, slave scum," the Baron's thunderous voice rolled through the ravine. "You've barred the gates, and think Pax walls will save you? My mages will tear this masonry apart within the hour. Get down on your knees, hand over the instigators of the rebellion, and I promise the rest will get a quick execution." Jin Woo slowly raised his hand, holding a small steel plate, the central control unit of the rune circuit created by the system. "Baron," Jin Woo said quietly, but clearly, thanks to the rock's acoustics. "Did you study well at your military academy? Do you know what the critical angle of slope collapse is?" Von Stock frowned, not understanding a word of the boy's strange speech. "What are you babbling about, madman?" "Attack! Wipe them out!" He swung his sword. The Crown's heavy cavalry, armor clanking, surged up the narrow stone road. Behind them, the spearmen advanced in tight formation. Bringing up the rear of the column were 3 earth mages in heavy green robes, already beginning to chant wall-destroying spells. Jin Woo calmly watched as the first ranks of riders passed the first bend, then the second, fully filling the tactical zone highlighted red by his system. In total, more than 300 men entered the trap. "Point of no return crossed," Jin Woo said, and pressed the steel pin into the control plate with effort. "Attention! Rune pressure circuit activated. Kinetic energy release. 100% at that same instant. The entire ravine shuddered with a terrible, guttural roar coming from the very depths of Black Peak. This was not an explosion or magic from the mages. It was the precise engineering calculation of Kong Jin Woo at work. Steel eccentrics hidden within the rock mass turned under the force of mana, instantly severing the main support locks of the stone slabs that held up the road. The entire outer edge of the switchback, thousands of tons of age-old granite, together with the riders and spearmen standing on it, separated from the mountain's mass with a dry, deafening crack, and within a second, plunged into the kilometer-deep abyss. Aorg! The wild, terror-filled screams of hundreds of men and the neighing of horses merged into one nightmarish roar, which was cut off instantly at the bottom of the ravine. The road simply vanished. Of the 450 men in the punitive detachment, only a handful of frightened infantrymen remained on a tiny surviving sliver of rock at the foot of the mountain, along with Baron von Stock himself, whose horse had managed to shy back at the last moment. His gleaming armor was now covered in gray granite dust, and his face had gone paler than linen. The 3 battle mages, who had been marching in the center of the column, were the first to fall to the bottom of the ravine, never managing to finish a single spell. Attention! Crushing defeat inflicted on the Crown's punitive detachment. Enemy personnel eliminated. 380 out of 450 special targets destroyed. Rank D battle mages 3/3 received. 25,000 units of system experience. Blue interface windows literally flooded Jin Woo's field of vision, rapidly updating his stats. Attention! Critical experience surplus recorded. Conditions for faction breakthrough met. Advancement to rank C available. Global project unlocked. Black Peak Underground Railway. Jin Woo rose to his feet, looking down at the trembling Baron von Stock. Tell your king, Baron. The Lord of the Mountain Citadel said coldly, and the rings of his blue interface flared so brightly they were visible even at the foot of the mountain. If he wants this silver, he shouldn't send soldiers. He should send architects. Though, even they won't help him. This mountain now plays by my rules. A unified, victorious roar burst from Choi Do-hyun's assault squad standing behind the commander. The age of slaves had ended. The age of dungeon engineering had begun. Attention! Faction evolution process launched. Rank E, Rank D. Synchronizing with Black Peak's core. 100% global territory status change to Independent Underground Enclave, New Technological Era unlocked. Early Mano-industrialism, the remnants of the Crown's punitive detachment, led by the Terramadden Baron von Stock, fled so fast they abandoned all their supply wagons, tents, and provisions at the foot of the crag. But Kang Jin-woo didn't even glance after them. His cynical, pragmatic engineer's mind was already processing the enormous mass of data the updated system had provided. Attention! Unique Era Blueprint unlocked. Underground rail line with chain drive effect. Speed of resource and combat unit movement between mountain tiers increased by 400% required materials. Cast steel high rank 2 tons. Support ties of cave, oak 500 PCS, Do-hyun. Jin Woo turned sharply to the mercenary, whose gaze, since the collapse of the switchback, had gone from merely respectful to outright fanatical. Call a general assembly in the great karst voids. Enough hauling rock on our backs. We're starting to build a railroad. Hey, railroad. Do-hyun scratched the back of his head with his war hammer, trying to process the unfamiliar phrase. Commander, is that like carts, but made of pure iron? It's what's going to turn our scattered mine into a single, steel-stamping mechanism. Jin Woo was already striding rapidly down the spiral staircase back into the depths of Black Peak. Let's move. We don't have much time before the Crown realizes it's lost a regular detachment here and sends a full-scale army with siege engineers. A day later, unprecedented work was underway in the Enclave's main cavern. Using the new smeltery, rebuilt according to the early Mano-industrialism blueprints, the former slaves cast long, heavy-profile steel bars this world's first rails. Jin Woo personally marked out the route. His left eye, glowing deep blue, projected laser levels directly onto the uneven rock floor. He ran the line from the lower faces where anthracite was mined, through the middle forges, straight to the upper defensive lines. Skill activated, geodetic route surveying rank D, grade leveling. Success. Maximum incline angle, 7 degrees warning. Obstacle detected granite outcrop, 3 meters thick. Recommended method, microtunnel excavation. Over here, men. Crowbars to the brace. Choi Do-hyun commanded, coordinating the work of the former miners, who now proudly called themselves the Engineering Excavation Corps. Instead of chaotic pickaxe blows, the men now worked according to Jin Woo's precisely calculated wedge fracture scheme. Deep boreholes were drilled into the stone, into which dry oak wedges were driven. Then they were doused with hot water from an underground spring. The wood swelled, creating colossal internal pressure, and the granite mass split with a dull crack along a perfectly straight line calculated by the system. The 3-meter passage was driven through in just 4 hours. The men laid heavy wooden ties, fastening the steel rails to them tightly with forged spikes. When the first 100 meters of track were laid, Jin Woo wheeled the first improvised handcar out of the workshop, a massive platform on cast steel wheels, fitted with a lever drive and a gear reducer they had captured from the clock tower of Lord Pak's castle. Well now, Do-hyun, jump on the lever, Jin Woo said, narrowing his eyes. The mercenary, together with the sturdiest miner, grabbed the wooden handle and heaved it down with effort. The gears meshed with a ringing metallic click. The heavy platform, loaded with a ton of finished crossbow bolts and steel shields, rolled smoothly and silently along the rails up the slope. The miners standing along the track froze for a second, then broke into a wild, deafening roar. What a group of 10 men would once have hauled with backbreaking effort over a full day now rolled by itself, powered by 2 men. Attention! First rail line successfully brought into operation. Faction logistical efficiency increased by 450%. Received 12,000 units of system experience. Your level has increased. Level 20, Level 22 defensive crafting branch unlocked. Armored support Manhwa handcars. Jinwoo watched the platform roll away upward and turned to the system's map. The blue contours of Black Peak were now threaded with the first vein of a new, industrial circulatory system. But the interface suddenly flashed an alarming crimson in the area of the lowest, flooded tiers. Attention! Critical, deep-level threat. High-frequency, seismic vibrations detected while laying rail track in the lower spring sector object. Ancient underground fault. Magmatic junction status. Awakening of an underground guardian. Threat class. Rank D plus danger from the depths of the flooded mine shaft. Right out of the black water that hadn't yet drained away came a horrifying, blood-chilling hiss that set the steel rails trembling underfoot. Commander. Do-hyun instantly gripped his hammer, peering into the darkness of the lower tier. That's not the Crown's men. Something is rising from the depths that Lord Pak always feared to wake. Jinwoo coolly cocked his assault crossbow, watching the blue countdown timer appear before his eyes. Makes no difference to us who we roll into concrete royal knights or cave beasts. Do-hyun, bring the heavy Manhwa handcar around. Time for an underground hunt, done by every rule of engineering. Attention! Combat encounter initiated in confined space. Enemy, Blind Granite Reaper rank D plus traits. Shell of silicious growths immune to ordinary cutting weapons. Navigates by vibration of rails and footsteps. The black water at the far end of the lower gallery bulged upward. With a dull, guttural rumble, a cyclopean carcass emerged from the flooded fault. The monster resembled a nightmarish hybrid of a centipede and an underground crayfish, encased in armor of gray, jagged granite. Over 10 meters long, it blindly waved massive bony whiskers, catching the faintest vibrations in the air. Its segmented body scraped against the freshly laid steel rails, leaving deep grooves in them. Back, Kong Jin-woo commanded, his left eye feverishly scanning the beast, identifying weak points. Geoanalysis of target structure. Success. Vulnerability. Shell joints in the abdominal region. Chitin thickness there does not exceed 3 centimeters. Recommended tactic. Use kinetic ramming or breach via hydrodynamic circuit. Do-hyun on the handcar. Men, cock the Manhwa thruster. Jinwoo leapt onto the platform of their first combat handcar, which they had just reinforced with trophy steel shields from Pak's guard. This handcar was no longer a peaceful little cart. On its nose, the miners, under Jinwoo's direction, had mounted a heavy forged ram of tempered high-carbon steel, and on its side stood 2 assault crossbows, rigidly fixed on swiveling mounts. Pump! Pump like the damned! Choi Do-hyun roared, throwing himself onto the long drive lever together with 3 sturdy workers. The reducer's gears howled. The heavy steel platform, weighing nearly 2 tons, began accelerating rapidly along the smooth, perfectly laid rails, straight toward the monster bearing down on them. Gaining speed, the handcar turned into a steel projectile flying along the rails. The Blind Reaper, sensing the colossal vibration, hissed furiously and lunged to meet them, its enormous mandibles, capable of biting through a log, spread wide. Heads down, Jinwoo shouted, catching the creature's head in the system's blue targeting ring. Fire! 2 miners simultaneously pulled the triggers of the mounted crossbows. 2 arm-length steel bolts struck the granite ridge on the monster's forehead with a dull thud. Ricochet! Sparks flew in every direction, but the bolts only left white scratches on the stone shell. The monster didn't even slow down. Can't take it heatin'. Hold the rails. Jinwoo yelled. 3 meters before impact, Jinwoo sharply yanked the emergency brake lever toward himself while simultaneously activating a system skill. Skill activated. kinetic redistribution rank D, all braking energy of the 2-ton platform redirected into the nose ram. The handcar's heavy steel wedge slammed at full speed directly beneath the massive jaw of the Granite Reaper. The colossal force of the impact, amplified by the system, lifted the Titan bulk of the monster clean off the rails. The granite shell on its chest burst with a horrifying crack. The creature was thrown back 5 meters and toppled onto its side with a roar, exposing its soft, pale gray underbelly. Du Hyun crowbars into the joints. Finish the vermin off. Jin Woo was the first to leap off the steel platform, reloading his hand crossbow on the move. Choi Du Hyun, with a wild battle cry, leapt onto the overturned body of the beast. His massive war hammer, forged from weapon-grade steel, came down on the exposed joint of the monster's legs with a dull, crushing sound. Take that, underground carrion. This is for our fallen men. The mercenary roared, blow after blow. The miners closed in on the Reaper in coordinated formation, driving heavy iron crowbars precisely into the vulnerable zones of its underbelly, highlighted by the system's blue markers. The creature thrashed its tail furiously against the walls of the gallery, causing local rockfalls, but the arch supports, which Jin Woo had personally calculated according to the laws of structural mechanics, held the tunnel's vault firmly. The mountain no longer aided its monsters, it obeyed the engineer. Jin Woo walked right up to the Reaper's head, thrashing in its death throes, pressed his assault crossbow directly against its blind, faceted eye, and coldly pulled the trigger. The faceted bolt drove into its full depth, piercing the creature's nerve cluster. Death came instantly. The monster's enormous, segmented body convulsed one last time and went still, slowly oozing thick, glowing man-infused blood. Attention! Deep-level boss destroyed. Blind Granite Reaper 1. First, you have protected Black Peak's infrastructure under construction. Received 8,000 units of system experience. Your level has increased. Level 22, Level 24 unique crafting material available. Reaper silicate plates, 300 kilograms, trophy blueprint received. Heavy mano-powered excavation shield. The men, breathing heavily, lowered their crowbars. They looked at the felled giant, a creature Lord Pax Chronicles had described as an ancient curse requiring monthly blood sacrifices, and grinned wildly, unrestrainedly. The curse of the depths was dead, would soon be cut into pieces, and sent off for smelting to reinforce the armor of their handcars. Jin Woo walked up to the carcass, touched the siliceous growth with his palm, and activated resource collection. Right before their eyes, the monster's shell began breaking down into neat, even blocks of high-strength material. Well then, Du Hyun, Jin Woo wiped the steel tip of his crossbow on the monster's hide and turned to the mercenary. The path to the lower levels is clear. We keep laying rail all the way down to the magmatic junction. There, according to the system's sensors, the temperature is ideal for setting up our first geothermal forge. Consider it done, Commander. Du Hyun wiped the sweat from his brow and shouted cheerfully at the workers. What are you standing around for, you useless engineers? Grab the spikes, haul the ties. The mountain won't build itself. Black Peak's rail line pushed deeper and deeper into the darkness, transforming the wild cave into the heart of an impregnable, mechanized underground state. Attention! Your faction has descended to the mark. Minus 800 meters unique zone discovered. Magmatic junction, rank C, natural temperature background, for 120 degrees Celsius. Warning. Without engineering protection, human presence in the zone is limited to 3 minutes. The air at the lower level grew so thick and hot that ordinary torches simply went out on their own, giving way to a crimson, ominous glow seeping through the tectonic cracks in the floor. Right beneath the feet of the engineering excavation core, the mountain's molten liquid gold churned and breathed an open magmatic pocket, a colossal source of heat and primordial mana. The men, despite having traded their slave rags for quality guardsman gambesons, could barely cope with the suffocating heat. Their skin blistered, and the metal of their tools scorched their fingers. Commander, there's nothing to breathe here. The metal's warping, Choi Do-hyun rasped, wrapping his face in a wet cloth. If we stay another half hour, we'll just roast in this armor like chestnuts in the ashes. No panicking. Kang Jin-woo stood right at the edge of the drop-off, where fiery waves of lava lazily rolled below. His left eye spun at double speed, projecting blue grids of future structures onto the scorching air. The system of the Lord of the Mountains Citadel had already linked the thermodynamic laws of Manhwa's old world with the magical energy of this dimension. Global project activated. Black Peak geothermal manosmeltery materials used. Reaper silicate plates 300 kilograms. Weapon-grade steel 200 kilograms core mana expenditure. 500 units internal reserve, full min. Unload the handcar. Jin-woo commanded, pointing to the platform piled with the silicate plates harvested from the Granite Reaper. These blocks don't melt, even at 1500 degrees. We're going to seal the magmatic junction with a protective housing and channel the heat flow straight into air injectors. Jin-woo personally activated the siege crafting skill. The system's blue mist enveloped the silicate blocks, and they began arranging themselves like pieces of a giant construction set over the lava fissure, forming a massive, airtight dome. Right into the center of the dome, Jin-woo integrated heavy steel pipes salvaged from the upper tier's castle ventilation. Engineering calculation complete. Heat exchange circuit launched, working zone temperature reduced from 420 degrees Celsius to a comfortable 26 degrees Celsius. Excess heat redirected to the piston turbines of the lower workshops at that same instant. With a terrifying hiss and whistle, the scorching air rushed into the steel arteries of the pipes. The temperature in the cavern plummeted almost visibly, giving way to a pleasant coolness driven by the forced ventilation system Jin-woo had created. The miners dropped their wet cloths with a sigh of relief and stared at the colossal structure. Above the magma now rose a futuristic blast furnace, encased in stone armor. Pure streams of concentrated mana roared from its nozzles, fed directly into the casting molds. Attention! Unique production structure successfully built. First geothermal manoforge. Rank D+, or smelting speed and quality increased by 800%. Technology unlocked. High-strength manosteel casting. Well, I'll be. Do-hyun cautiously approached the cold outer wall of the silicate dome and pressed his palm against it. Commander, you tamed hell itself. It's not hell, Do-hyun. It's our new filling station. Jin-woo smirked cynically. System, update the region's tactical map. What's happening with our crown? A global notification window unfolded before the Citadel Lord's eyes, but this time the enemy markers weren't red, they were an ominous violet. Attention! Your audacious victory over the punitive detachment has drawn the attention of higher powers. The Royal Magical Council has declared Black Peak a zone of tectonic heresy. The Iron Legion, under the command of Supreme Archmage Magnus rank C+, is converging on the foot of the mountain enemy army feature. 50 heavy siege golems capable of breaking through solid rock and destroying tunnels. Time until siege. 72 hours. The men, reading the system logs Jin-woo projected right onto the cavern wall, fell. Silent. Heavy golems capable of crushing the mountain itself. This was an entirely different level of threat. This time, collapsing a switchback road wouldn't be enough. Golems, huh? Jin-woo slowly shifted his gaze to the newly activated geothermal forge, from which the first blindingly white stream of manosteel was already flowing into the casting molds. They think their stone puppets are the pinnacle of this world's engineering thought. Well then, it's time to show them what happens when 19th century blueprints meet limitless magical energy. He walked up to the system's crafting terminal and selected a tab that had been hidden until now, one that had opened up after the faction's rank breakthrough. Would you like to launch the global project? Armored combat, locomotive, iron breakthrough, rank D+. Required resources. Manosteel 1.5 tons, gear reducers 4 sets, siege rune pressure engines 2 PCS. Assembly time 48 hours. Do-hyun, seal off the middle and upper tiers. All hands to the manoforge. We're switching to round-the-clock operation. Jin Woo struck the blue button of the system interface decisively. The Crown wants siege warfare in our tunnels? They'll get it. We're going to build something their golems simply have no answer for. A second later, the entire cavern was submerged in the deafening roar of hydraulic hammers and the ringing of anvils. The first heavy weapon of the independent underground enclave was being born. Attention! Project Iron Breakthrough 100% complete combat unit created. Heavy armored Mano locomotive Iron Breakthrough, rank D, plus technical specifications. Weight 18 tons. Armor multilayer Mano steel with Reaper shell inserts. Engine twin piston siege, Mano hydraulic power. 800 system units install weaponry. Nose Hydra ram, rock breaker. For paired, all-around traverse siege crossbow silence fell over the vast excavation depot of the lower tier. The men of the Engineering Excavation Corps stood with their mouths open, gazing at the triumph of human thought and system crafting. Before them, resting on freshly reinforced rails, was a genuine steel monster. The black, faceted hull of the war machine, welded from thick plates of Mano steel, gleamed dully in the light of the geothermal forge. In place of windows were narrow siding slits protected by armor glass. At the nose of the locomotive, a 3-meter hydraulic ram jutted forward predatorily, capable by Kong Jin Woo's calculations of shattering solid rock of medium hardness. From the exhaust pipes on the roof, instead of dirty smoke, excess pure superheated mana hissed quietly out, tinting the air a soft blue. This is a god of war, Commander, Choi Do-hyun whispered, reverently running his callous palm over the rivets of the armor plating. With a beast like this, we won't just defend ourselves. We'll drive this crown all the way back to the capital. Our task isn't the capital, Do-hyun. Our task is to hold the house. Kong Jin Woo checked the tension of the drive chains on the massive wheel sets. System report on enemy force status. Attention! The Iron Legion, under the command of Supreme Archmage Magnus, has entered the tactical zone foot of Black Peak. Siege Golems 50-50 have begun excavating countersalt tunnels enemy objective. Bypass the upper castle's defensive lines. Direct breakthrough into the central forge's seismic sensor detects. The Golem's first assault tunnel will intersect our main rail line on the middle tier in 12 minutes. Jin Woo smiled cynically. The Royal Siege Engineers and Mages thought in straight lines. If slaves were sitting underground, then all you had to do was cut through the wall along the shortest vector and burn out the rebels' nest. They had no idea their assault corridor was about to slam straight into the Enclave's ready-made, perfectly calculated transport artery. All combat crew, to your stations, the Lord of the Citadel commanded, leaping into the armored driver's cab. Do-hyun, take the nose crossbow. Men, pressurize the Mano chambers to maximum. Today we show the Legion what a heating collision on rails looks like. For miners furiously worked the pumping levers. The blue pressure indicators on the control panel in front of Jin Woo began filling rapidly, moving from the green zone into the critical yellow. The Mano engine howled, and the heavy steel wheels of the Iron Breakthrough spun in place with a deafening screech, throwing off sprays of sparks. The machine surged forward smoothly, but with incredible power, heading up the main tunnel to meet the breaching enemy. The middle tier of Black Peak shuddered with dull impacts. At the point where the rail line curved gently around the central rock pillar, the granite wall was laced with deep cracks. Stone grit and age-old dust flew from it. Archmage Magnus' underground golems, massive 4-meter anthropomorphic monsters assembled from crude boulders and bound together by shimmering green magical energy methodically, like giant jackhammers, punched their way into the fortress. The right wall of the tunnel finally collapsed entirely. Out of the resulting breach, glowing with venomous green runes on their stone brows, siege golems began clumsily tumbling through one after another. Behind them, holding long spears at the ready, came the elite infantry of the Iron Legion in heavy plate armor. There they are, the rats. The breach held, shouted the Royal Centurion, pointing his sword at the newly opened, spacious tunnel. Hold the position, mages forward, reinforced the Centurion cut off. From the deep darkness of the tunnel, where the strange iron strips on the floor ran off into, came a swelling rumble unlike anything he'd ever heard. The ground beneath the soldiers' feet trembled at a frequency that set the links of their chain mail vibrating. It didn't resemble the pounding of cavalry or an earth mage's spell. It was a pure, monotonous, mechanical drone of approaching doom. And then, from around the bend, blinding the legionnaires with a powerful manhwa spotlight, the iron breakthrough burst into view. What in the world is that monster? Fall back! The Centurion screamed hysterically. But there was nowhere to run in the narrow 3-meter tunnel. Jin Wu's locomotive was bearing down at over 60 kilometers per hour, driven by the unyielding steel rails. Ram at full power, Jin Wu shouted, throwing the pressure release lever. Combat function activated. Hydraulic crusher. Impact kinetic energy increased by 300%. The heavy steel wedge at the nose of the armored train slammed at full speed into the first, largest siege golem. The Crown's 2-ton stone monster, once the pride of the military academy, simply shattered to pieces under the force of such colossal mass, turning into a heap of fine rubble and sparkling green dust. The locomotive didn't even slow down. It literally crushed the second and third golems into the walls of their own assault passage, reducing the magical constructs to construction debris. Fire from his sides, Choi Do-hyun roared, squeezing the trigger of the paired crossbow. Through the armored ports of the iron breakthrough, a hail of heavy steel bolts flew into the panicking ranks of the Royal Infantry. At such close range in a confined space, the Legionnaires' armor meant nothing. The bolts skewered 2 or 3 men at once, pinning them to the granite walls. Attention! Enemy strike units eliminated. Siege golems 5/50ths, Legion Infantry 42 300ths received. 14,000 units of system experience. Commander, they're retreating back into their tunnel. Do-hyun shouted, reloading the crossbow's cassette magazine. Jin Wu braked sharply, halting the armored train right opposite the breach the golems had made. The boy calmly opened the steel cab door and stepped out onto the running board, holding his assault crossbow. His left eye burned bright blue, scanning the depths of the enemy's assault tunnel. There, panicking and trampling each other, the remnants of the Iron Legion's first vanguard were retreating. Archmage Magnus thought that underground, his magic set the rules. Jin Wu smiled cynically, pulling a small cylindrical device from his belt pouch, a ticking system-timed engineering rune charge. Do-hyun, get ready to reverse. We're going to seal this corridor with their own bones. Attention! Tactical rune charge detonation initiated target. Iron Legion assault corridor estimated time to vault collapse. 10 seconds. Jin Wu coldly hurled the ticking cylinder deep into the breach the golems had made and leapt back into the driver's cab. Hey Versi, Douillon. Full reverse, he commanded. The mercenary threw his weight onto the heavy gearshift lever. The mano-hydraulic engine of the iron breakthrough roared furiously. The wheels spun in the opposite direction, and the 18-ton steel monster rolled backward along the rails with a deafening screech, pulling out of the blast zone. The rune charge's explosion was nothing like the ordinary fiery flash of human mages. Instead, directed kinetic compression fired. Pressure in the assault corridor spiked instantly to a critical level, shattering all the magical bindings holding up the passage's temporary vaults. Thousands of tons of age-old, solid granite came crashing down with a dry, rolling roar, sealing the passage shut for good and burying the surviving vanguard of the Iron Legion alive beneath it. Neon blue log lines flickered before Jin Wu's eyes once more, lighting up the locomotive's cab with a triumphant glow. Attention! Enemy's first assault column fully eliminated. Siege golems 5/50 destroyed, beyond recovery received. 18,000 units of system experience. Your level has increased. Level 24, level 25. Next stage of technological evolution available. Thick gray dust gradually settled onto the rails. But Jin Wu did not relax. He pulled up the general tactical schematic of Black Peak on the cab's windshield. The blue contours of his underground fortress remained under threat. 3 more red points still burned on the outer pressure sensors. Supreme Archmage Magnus, realizing the first tunnel dig had failed, had ordered the remaining 45 golems to disperse and begin simultaneous excavation from different sides of the mountain, trying to stretch the defenders' forces thin. Commander Choi Do-hyun, wiping soot from his face with his sleeve, watched the system's flashing markers with alarm. They're digging in 3 places at once. Our handcar is fast, but we can't be at the eastern, western, and southern galleries all at the same time. If they break through simultaneously, they'll simply overwhelm us with numbers. Jin Woo smiled, cynical and confident, looking at the 3-dimensional map. To an ordinary medieval general, this would be a dead end. But to a Korean engineer who knew what proper dispatching and route optimization meant, it was a standard logistics problem. Do-hyun, they think they control the situation because they have more shovels. Jin Woo touched the control panel, activating the new blueprints unlocked at level 25. But they forgot we're on our own territory. We're not going to chase every golem. We're going to make the very geometry of the tunnels work for us. Announce over the intercom. Excavation Corps to engage, switch points no. 2. And number 4. We're converting the entire rail network to cyclic ring defense mode. Global Engineering Directive activated. Fan-shaped rail circuit core mana used. 400 units feature. High-speed automatic switches allow the locomotive to change direction without losing kinetic energy. Jin Woo pushed the mano-thruster accelerator all the way down. The iron breakthrough, venting gray-blue steam with a whistle, sped along the ring tunnel. The system guided the machine along a perfect trajectory, automatically switching the rail points right in front of the wheel sets. On the mountain's outer slope, in the fortified camp of the Iron Legion, Supreme Archmage Magnus stood before a magical mirror projecting the interior of Black Peak. His gray brows were furiously knitted, and his fingers, gripping his rune staff, trembled with rage. "What's happening down there?" The mage's voice thundered, making his staff officers hunch their shoulders. "My golems are reporting some kind of steel monster moving underground at incredible speed. It wiped out the Easter detachment in 3 minutes. How did slaves manage to create something like this?" Lord Magnus, a pale siege master, timidly stepped forward. "Our sensors show this creature isn't just running around randomly. It's moving along some kind of fixed artificial circuit. Wherever our golems dig, this steel beast always ends up right opposite the breach point, as if the mountain itself is putting it in the way of our strikes." "Nonsense. Send all remaining golems to the central gallery. Crush them with sheer mass." Magnus roared, channeling a stream of his green mana through his staff straight into the ground, forcing the stone giants to accelerate their digging. But it was already too late. Kong Jin Woo calculated this move in advance. Thanks to the fan-shaped circuit, his armored train had become an elusive, merciless shuttle of death. The locomotive would burst out of the darkness, crush another cluster of golems with its hydraulic ram, mow down infantry with its side-mounted crossbows, and before the enemy could organize a response, switch tracks with a clang and head off on a fresh loop. The Legion's Western Assault Detachment was crushed and cut off by a counter-collapse. The tunnels of Black Peak had become a gigantic, perfectly tuned meat grinder, operated by a single man with a blue system eye. After 2 hours of continuous fighting, the seismic activity around the mountain began rapidly dying down. The Iron Legion, having lost 3/4 of its siege constructs and its finest infantry, had drowned in its own blood without advancing a single meter into the mountain. Attention! Large-scale underground siege successfully repelled. Crown siege golems destroyed. 50-50 its complete rout of enemy technological power. The Iron Legion is retreating. Combat capability lost. Received 35,000 units of faction experience. Attention! Your base Black Peak has received the status Legendary Impregnable Bastion rank D. Access unlocked to construct the first Mano-Industrial City. New Soul 1 Jin Woo brought the heavily breathing Iron Breakthrough to a stop in the central depot. The Manhwa forge behind him continued its steady, powerful hum, casting new rails. The men, exhausted but wildly happy, climbed out of the armored cab, met by jubilant shouts from the workers who had remained in the citadel. The boy walked out onto the observation platform of the upper castle. Far below, in the pre-dawn twilight, the pitiful remnants of what had once been the fearsome Iron Legion were shamefully hauling their supply wagons back toward the border. Archmage Magnus no longer looked formidable. His army had been broken not by magic, but by pure engineering calculation. Jin Wu adjusted his cloak's collar. His left eye had gone dark, returning to its usual color, but Minho's cold smile played on his lips. "Well, that's that, Crown," he said quietly, looking out at the world spread below. "You thought this was just a slave rebellion in a mine. But now this mountain is the core of a new industrial empire. And soon our rails will extend beyond these cliffs."